Here's what you gotta learn about the guests on Tri-City Sports Now with me, Marky, Billson, on 1420 WEMB Sports Radio. Well, it used to be. We don't include. We're in the Tri-Cities, but we don't include that officially in the name and such. But here's what you need to know: if you're ever in a foxhole, they're who you want with you. Josh Brown, who's coming up at 1:30, once kept his commitment in the hospital while his wife was having a baby, to talk about the Braves. Jerry Bonkowski is just coming on there, and he said, boy, suddenly I might have caught something, but he's keeping his commitment here because this is the last race around the July 4th weekend in Daytona. Next year, they move the race to the playoffs, and they've got the July 4th race in Indianapolis. So I've got a lot of memories of the second race in Daytona, the Saturday night race, if you will. But let's see here, end of an era, and when you think about this, I mean, it's not going away, it's just moving to the playoffs, which is probably good for Daytona, let's face it. What do you think it's going to be different like when they move this from Daytona to Indianapolis in the future, Jerry Bonkowski?
Well, you know, there's such a tradition and history around having the race in Daytona around the 4th of July weekend. It's going to be a different, attitude or atmosphere, if you will, having the race in Indianapolis. And the other thing, too, about Indianapolis, I mean, here I am in Chicago, just 2.5 hours north of Indy, and we've been having 95-degree weather the last 3 days. And that concerns me. I mean, you really want to have a race in the middle or in the early part of July, especially on the 4th of July weekend. I just don't know how fans are going to react to it. I don't know if it's going to draw fans, if it's not going to draw fans. I don't know. I mean, I'm probably as curious as anybody to see how this is going to play out. But it's definitely going to be a change with not having Daytona on the schedule, around the 4th of July.
I had this idea. I want you to see what you think about this. Maybe you could get this idea going. But people wonder, where's Dover? I mean, if there's any track that seems to be left out with the new schedule changes, it's Dover. And I was recalling, July 4th. I remember the bicentennial. I was 5 years old, and my mother was going to Bryn Mawr at the time. So, I mean, we celebrated in Philly. And my goodness, there was no better place to celebrate the 4th of July during the bicentennial than Philadelphia. I don't have to explain that. But Dover is the Philly track. 4th of July, you see where I'm going here? Do you think that there might be any momentum or that could be a possibility, let's say, in 2026 when the country turns 250 years old?
In theory, that sounds great. In practice, I don't know if it could be played out, though, and I'll tell you why. Dover's, about 75, 80 miles or so from Philly, but you're also maybe about 2 hours or so, give or take, from Washington, D.C. And we saw all the festivities we had yesterday between the military parade and then, of course, the 4th of July fireworks celebration and that. I really wonder, though, especially if the race were to fall on either the 3rd or the 4th, would it really draw a lot of fans? Because I think that, and this is my opinion, but, when it comes to patriotism over racing, what do fans choose? I know where you're coming from, Marky, and I understand the connection with Dover, and in fact, you've got a Dover. What is it? new fans in. And, it'll be interesting to see if we'll see that at Indy or Dover or wherever else the 4th of July weekend may play out. One other thing I wanted to add is that, I would not be against moving the 4th of July race weekend around every year. I would not be against that at all. But there's logistical issues with that as well, too. But I think that fans around the country, I think they would be welcome to something like that. I mean, I'd love to see a 4th of July weekend in Bristol. I think it'd be great.
Yeah, there you go. Hey, it's something a little bit different and all that, but yeah, we're talking to Jerry Bonkowski, NBCSports.com, plus sometimes you hear him on Sirius. Of course, you always hear him here on Tri-City Sports Now, usually 1 o'clock on Mondays and Fridays. Jerry, I mentioned Dover right there for 4th of July, but, this race used to be run, actually, on the 4th of July. We've often talked about, hey, why doesn't NASCAR do a midweek race and all this? Why was it ever changed from the 4th of July to the weekend?
Well, I think a lot of it had to do with when we went, what was it, the late or middle 70s, I think it was, when we started celebrating holidays on a weekend that was more convenient as opposed to the actual day itself. Like, for example, President's Day, which you can combine Lincoln's birthday and George Washington's birthday, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think that played part of it. And then, we saw the explosion of NASCAR in the 90s. We saw more tracks added, more races added, and you had to move races around to fit what made the most sense for those particular tracks. I'll give you an example. In Fontana, it used to begin at April, then NASCAR took away the September Labor Day weekend race and they gave Fontana. That proved to be very, not very, it was a difficult race to sell in Southern California on Labor Day weekend because everybody's either going to the beach, they're going to the mountains, they had a lot of other things to do. And so now we're back on the schedule where that race is either in March or April in Fontana. So, again, I think you're going to see some significant changes in the schedule. We already are seeing it for 2020, but I think come 2021, you're going to see a major change in the schedule. And I would not be surprised to see if we actually reduce the number of races. I mean, I've heard anywhere between 30 and 32 races, maybe 34 races. Maybe we start, cutting a race here or cut a race there and see how it goes for a couple of years, and we cut maybe a couple more. I think the sweet spot in the schedule would be 30 to 32 races, or maybe even 28 to 32 races, in my opinion.
Now, I want to go and talk about the final July 4th weekend race, and I also want to make the final comment here before I go to Denny Hamlin, if he can sweep the Daytona races. But I just want to say, look, I would be in favor of moving the NASCAR race onto July 4th during a weekday, as we've talked about, and all this, if for no other reason to get the hot dog eating contest off the front page. I mean, that's big with me. But, Jerry, one of the things that I want to ask you is, I've heard Denny Hamlin has had to, is it true that he's got to use, for this race tomorrow, a wrecked car due to the spacers and all that are going to be used for the first time in Daytona? Okay, I was trying to say there's somebody who's going to use at least a car that had been wrecked before, and
they rebuilt it. Yeah, they rebuilt it. I mean that's standard. I mean, teams build cars specifically for certain types of tracks, and that was a car that he wrecked at Daytona. Mm-hmm. They put it back together. It's brand new. It's as good as new.
I was curious. I mean, yeah, that happens a lot. I was curious, though. Is this the same car that we used at the Daytona 500? Because I thought that went, when you won that went to the Hall of Fame for a year. What?
You're right, and I don't know. I mean, I wonder if maybe this is the Talladega car. I don't know. I'm just taking a guess. I mean, I believe they did put his car already into Daytona already after the race, if I'm not mistaken. So I don't know what they're going to do.
Now, you mentioned, I mean, certainly, yes. I mean, cars are repaired in NASCAR all the time, but I was kind of curious about putting the car back together and all this. I mean, look, I can go to a used car lot with a car expert, and he says, look, I'm going to tell you why you're going to get a good deal on this. Take a look at how the fenders are. This car's been wrecked. You can say that, and you don't want this car. Somebody can do that. In NASCAR, obviously, I mean it's commonplace and all this, but what does a race car lose after it's been wrecked like that, Jerry Bonkowski?
Well, I've always been in the mindset that when you rebuild a race car, after it's been wrecked, a lot of times it's better than the original car. That's my opinion. And so, you're putting in brand new parts, brand new fenders, brand new trunks, brand new hoods, brand new motors.
Mm-hmm.
You're essentially going to have a brand new car. It's just that, a lot of teams, they prefer the chassis, the structure of the chassis, the way they built it originally before it was wrecked in the first place. So they go back to that thing because they feel that car, the combination of the car, the motor, the transmission, it's the best they have, in terms of, comparing against maybe a brand new car. Plus, you also, in a sense, have a understanding of what that car is like already in competition before whatever wreck it was involved in before, if you know what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes sense to, rebuild the car. It's more economical to rebuild the car. And like I said, sometimes when you rebuild a car, it's better than brand new.
The big drama of this race, I think, at least from yesterday during practice, was, of course, Brad Keselowski running into William Byron. And I've seen blogs that say, hey, what were you doing? I think Byron has to use a backup car, start at the end of the field, that sort of thing. Keselowski says, look, I'm not lifting. What was that all about? What am I not getting from that incident with Keselowski and Byron?
Boys will be boys. That's the way I look at it. I mean, I think that, I was kind of surprised that incident happened because it was only practice. It was not, it wasn't qualifying. It wasn't, it wasn't for the race itself. And to me, that's, you're taking a bit of a risk, not only punting another driver, but what does it do to your own race car too as well? I mean, if Keselowski goes into tomorrow's race and his car is not in good shape, well, do we point at what happened with Byron? That's the other thing. One other thing, Marky, I forgot to say one thing. I wanted to go back for a second.
Sure.
About Indianapolis. We were talking about, another big concern I have is unless, and I have not heard this, but unless they bring in lights for Indianapolis Motor Speedway, what happens if the race on the 3rd or the 4th or the 5th and it gets rain and they can't run it that day? Then they run it the next day. I mean, that concerns me because a lot of fans, that can impact their 4th of July weekend celebrating, cookouts, things like that. A lot of the fans, the Indiana, Illinois, Kentucky, Ohio, Michigan area, if they go down to Indianapolis for the day or maybe for an overnight and then they go there for the race day, then they have to stay another day for the race if weather becomes an issue. What do you do then? I mean, what does that do to their celebration too? So I'm going to really be interested to see how this all plays out with Indy. I'm not convinced that Indianapolis, again, my opinion, I'm not convinced that's the best place to have a midsummer race. I think you'd probably be better off in some places be a little bit cooler and the weather might be a little more friendlier, if you will, because there's always a chance of storms can pop up, with no notice. I mean, we saw last weekend in Chicago. I mean, we had heard that there was going to be storms on Sunday, and they were supposed to be far north of the race. And then all of a sudden, boom, it's monsoon, and we get delayed for 3.5 hours. It was pretty. I mean, I went out into the right in front of the media center when the storms were coming, and it just started raining, but the wind was unbelievable. I almost got blown over. My wife, but yeah, you lose 100 pounds, you almost get blown over. There you go.
Jerry Bonkowski is the new Stu Miller. We got the All-Star game coming up here on Tuesday. There you go. That's the NASCAR baseball reference of today's show. Okay, so there we go. I will say this. I mean, I understand, if it's delayed, but I think any race that's delayed, it's not ideal. Whether it was, say, Bristol or Martinsville last year, or what you're theorizing could happen with Indianapolis in terms of 4th of July being run and all this. I would say, I would kind of see that race, and I think maybe even Daytona tomorrow, Saturday night, has this aspect to it. It's got the backyard barbecue goes along with the race, just like, let's say, eating turkey on Thanksgiving goes along with watching the Lions and the Cowboys.
Yeah, but they have lights, though. Indianapolis doesn't. Unless they bring them in, unless they bring portable lights, which is an extremely expensive proposition in this day and age. That's going to be, I remember, what was it, maybe about 12 years ago or so, I was in Michigan for a Sunday race, and we didn't complete it until Tuesday. And that was in June, I believe it was. So my fear is that, if we have an Indy 500 week, a 4th of July weekend at Indianapolis, and there's no lights, and it plus, not to mention, takes, a lot longer to dry a 2.5-mile oval
Mm-hmm.
than it does a, regular track. I mean, when are you going to run out of time? I mean, how long do you run a race at Indianapolis before you run out of daylight or you run out of, the weather comes bad? Then you got to go to the next day and potentially maybe even the day after that. So I'm hoping it'll be a good situation. I'm hoping it'll be a great situation, actually. I'm hoping it'll be good for NASCAR, for the sport, for the fans. But, I just think it could be, it'll be interesting to see how that weather in Indy at that time of year is going to play out. Because Indy typically has the same kind of weather we have here in Chicago, and, it'll be interesting to watch, for sure.
I hate to bash Indianapolis. It's the Brickyard, the most legendary of all tracks, for crying out loud.
And I'm not bashing Indy. No, I'm not bashing them at all. I'm just saying that they have to work within certain limitations. No lights and the weather. And that's, especially the weather without lights is a very difficult thing to work with.
That's why Indy starts so soon, I guess, right there. I'm telling you, Dover, 4th of July weekend. I'm telling you, right there. It saves the track. There you go. Phil, like I say, you're talking to the guy. I remember my 5 years old, my mom taking me to Franklin Quarter to the Liberty Bell. I'm telling you, right there. So, anyway, Tri-City Sports Now. I'm Marky Billson talking to Jerry Bonkowski. We saw the Spacers in Talladega. I'm hearing in practice rounds they had speeds of 204 miles an hour in Daytona here for the practice sessions with the drafts and all that. How do you think Spacers have changed NASCAR from what you saw at Talladega and will impact Daytona, whereas before it was restrictor plates?
Well, the thing I found interesting, Marky, is that several drivers that have been asked about the difference between the plates and the Spacers at Talladega back in April, they said there wasn't really that much difference.
Yeah.
Technically, you're supposed to have more passing power, supposed to have a little bit more flexibility, if you will, behind the wheel. But most of the drivers, but many of the drivers did say that there really was not that significant of a difference. And it's a whole different race to run there than you would at Talladega, even with the Spacers. So I think that we're going to see a whole different race, and I think we may, because it will be the first race we've seen at Daytona rather, without plates. I think we may see a lot more wrecks. I think it's going to be difficult for these drivers to adapt to it. And if it's not a lot more wrecks, then it's going to be potentially, more, hopefully, close racing. But where does it evolve potentially to follow the leader racing? Or will it evolve into that? I mean, it's just, we don't know. We will know tomorrow night for sure.
Jerry, I've been reading a lot that says, hey, don't pick the favorites, in this race. Do you agree with that? Who's going to win?
I'm going with a dark horse. I'm going to go with somebody that you probably would not expect to win. And I'm looking at I'm looking at three different guys. I'm looking at Kyle Larson, who I still think is going to win a race here soon. And then I'm going to look at his two of the teammates at Hendrick Motorsports. Alex Bowman, who won in Chicago, William Byron. I think William Byron can get his first couple in. I'm very, if they can stay out of trouble, they adapt to the track well, the weather's not an issue, I think that those two guys, as well as Larson, have the best shot at winning.
I'm going to give you a long shot pick that just came into my mind, but Bubba Wallace, because he finished second in the Daytona 500 2 years ago. And I think that Chevy, I've been hearing it, Chevy's, the super speedway and all that. That's my dark horse. That's my sleeper right there, Bubba Wallace. And okay, so he's Jerry Bonkowski. He's no sleeper. He's a favorite. And you can read him at NBCSports.com. He's got a great story about Ryan Preece and Chris Beecher being good teammates and friends. Kyle Busch, he's got a story there. And also the NHRA. So check him out there. We'll be back after this. The Hall of Fame Pro Football in Canton, they might have a class of 20 next year. We're going to be talking about that on Tri-City Sports Now, and we'll be focusing on it next.